Hey there, welcome back to another Touchdesigner tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at deconstructing objects and point clouds in Touchdesigner. And in this particular tutorial we're going to be creating an effect that looks a little bit like this, with some option to create stuff obviously without as much feedback and maybe some more movement like this if that's something you prefer. Just before we dive in, I just want to say I'm recovering from being sick, so forgive my voice please. That's also why I've not recorded a few videos over the last few days. And this is the first video I'm recording since I hit 1,000 subscribers, which is unbelievable. I said a little bit more of a thank you over my Patreon, but again, thank you all so much. I put out a little survey asking what free file people would want, and I think the consensus was either a little tracking one or an audiovisual. If you have a preference, let me know. I might record that this week, but otherwise today we're going into this project file. What you will need is nothing, basically. This should work with any object, so we can use the default Touchdesigner objects, like we can use a sphere, for example, if I plug that one into there, like so. We can also use this custom one that I have like this. You can also use point cloud files, which you can take a 3D scan on an app like Polycam. We're not going to be going over that in this tutorial, but if you're not familiar with point clouds and do want to learn about 3D scanning yourself and putting it in Touchdesigner or your environment or whatever, let me know and maybe I can do a bit of a hybrid tutorial for that. But you can see that if I can drag this one in, we have this point cloud, or this default point cloud here, which is a banana in Touchdesigner, and we're just sort of resetting it like so, and then we're getting these little jaggedy sci-fi like trails coming off of it. Yeah, but basically, as all my other tutorials go, this project file is available for download on my Patreon. Just click the link, a few bucks a month, and you'll get immediate access to all these files, and you can use all these files as well as drag and drop your own in, and it should just be plug and play. Otherwise, we're gonna create what we're looking at right now, and I'm gonna keep this network up here for reference just in case I forget anything. Cool. Alright, so I'm going to do this from the point of a object, because that has a little bit more work for us to do, but I will also note the point where you can just drag a point file in. So the first thing we want to do is drag your object in, or in this case I'm going to get a sphere, which is a 3D little object like so, from the SOP tab. I'm then going to connect this to a sprinkle. The sprinkle is going to evenly distribute this object into a bunch of little points, and in this case we're going to turn it from 1,000 to 10,000. I think that should be enough points, but not too many that it slows things down, and that's pretty good, and this is going to be the source for all of the particles flying off in the different directions. Cool. Next we want to connect this to a null for good practice. And then finally we want to convert this to a top, but first we have to go through a chop, not an info, sorry. So we want to right click this exit and then go SOP2, like so, and then grab this SOP2 and go to top, and then chop2. So SOP to chop to top. As we do more tutorials on this channel, I'm probably not going to be explaining all of the basic beginner concepts in Touchdesigner on repeat. But if any of this doesn't make any sense to you, then feel free to go and watch some of my more fundamental tutorials on this channel. Cool, so on this chop 2, we want to make sure we go fit to square, and then change the data format to RGB to get the 3 values. And then let's connect this to a null. So this is the point from this point forward where if you're using a point cloud file, you can instead connect it into this null. So if I get a point file in, like so, and I click this little plus and then select banana, these are the default ones, and do I need to do anything else? You might need to, For some reason, this one doesn't automatically load the red, green, blue. So you might need to click this, and I'm not sure why it's not coming. Oh, there it is. X, Y, Z. Yeah. Some weird thing was happening there. But we have our banana here, but I'm going to keep working with the sphere to keep it simple. So let's explain the next few steps on basically what we're doing. So we have here, this is our point cloud, which would be our sphere that we've sort of turned into a point cloud, where they're going to map it into some noise, which is just going to be some randomly selected noise. Then we're going to start a feedback loop, which uses a threshold as well as a little bit of noise here, and then combines the two, which basically will keep the banana in place, like a certain threshold of it, and then combine it with a bunch of sporadic noise sending off from points of the banana. And then this combination of the two happens here. And then we have this little feedback loop, so that way it doesn't just shoot off in one direction, it like keeps repeating. And then we just convert it into an object here. So let's start with creating that feedback loop. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab this noise operator. So you can grab a noise from the top. I'm going to connect this null into both the inputs. Then you're welcome to copy my settings if you want to get the exact same sort of noise, but essentially when we get to the point where we're rendering it out, you might want to come back to this noise and then play around with some of these parameters to fine tune it to your own liking. I believe this output is, you might want to change it to input plus noise. Again, this is something I've done after having played around with it and deciding on the look. But if that's something you guys want to copy, feel free to pause the video and copy that. I'm then going to connect it to a null because this will be the start of our feedback loop. So it's good practice. You can also rename this start, and then I have like feedback end here, which is also very common. But in this case, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to bring this like that and then copy this one down and then slowly go through what we're doing. So the first thing I want to do is connect in a feedback. This is just going to be a point that we define. I've also using the keyboard in chop, which is a common practice in Touchdesigner, where we can grab the keyboard in chop like so. On default it is 1, and then you click this plus button, drag here, hover over, and then drop on the pulse chop reference. Basically every time now that we press 1 on our keyboard, it's going to pulse the feedback, which if I show you the background, it basically does that. That's me tapping 1, like so. The next thing I want to do is connect it into another noise. Again, I'm just going to copy this one because I want to use the exact same settings. If you want to copy my settings, here they are. You can pause and copy, input plus noise once again. The next thing we want to do is connect this to a math. And this is very, very important. You can see here we have the multiply scale turned down a lot. If I were to adjust that, you can see, oh, I'm dragging the wrong one. If I were to adjust it, you can see the noise like dramatically sets off. So I just want a tiny, tiny bit to get those very, very jaggedy paths that we just saw. So the way we do that is when we connect in our noise, we want to go to connect it to our math, then go to the range, the multi-add tab, and then set the multiplier to 0.001. I think it was 001, not, yep, 001. So just a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of noise that we're going to combine in with the original image, just so we keep everything very slow and methodical, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, essentially we want to combine these two. So you can use a comp if you want, or just an add if you want to keep it simple. And plug this one to the top, and then plug this one into the bottom. Awesome. The next thing we want to do is, where is it? Up here. Grab these little ones. So we want to create a new noise. This is going to be entirely separate from itself. In the common tab, we want to set the resolution to 1000 by 1000 or 124 by 124. I'm just going to type in 1000 though to keep it the same, like that. And then I'm actually going to use this noise here. And again, if you want to copy my settings, here they are. And then the output doesn't have any input, so it'll just be noise. Cool. Then we connect this to a threshold. Again, making sure we just select a little bit of it. I've picked this value just by essentially, again, playing around with it. In this case, we'll copy what I have, and then we'll come back and play with it later to adjust, to, you know, sort of get whatever kind of look we want. So you can see here, I just have not equal threshold at around halfway, and then I've turned the soften all the way up. I've then done a select. The select's totally not necessary, actually. In fact, we can just connect it in, but essentially I've just selected the, is it the start? Yeah, the start. So the first null here, I've dragged and dropped it onto the select. You know, we'll go below for this one. So now we have this threshold noise that we want to combine these two once again. In this case, we're going to use a multiply. So we can get a multiply top. Drag these two in. And then we want to connect these two different paths with an over. This is going to be confusing, but I want this one to go onto the top and this one to go onto the bottom. That's my bad. That's just the way I structured this file here. In fact, I can probably get rid of those and then drag that one like so. And then we just want to create another null, which is going to be us cutting off our feedback. So we want to now drag this onto our feedback, and it will do that little dotted line. And then you can do another null if you want, just to end our entire chain here. And that's pretty much it. So you can't really envision it now. We're going to need to render it out. But you can kind of get the gist of what's going on. We have our default sphere. We're bringing in a tiny bit of noise, combining it, and then doing the same here, and combining them all together with this very precise noise that I played around with until I got a shape that I liked, and just repeatedly adding that onto each other, like so. These low thresholds and low multipliers ensure that the noise doesn't perpetually just stack on top of each other at a overly increasing rate, if that makes sense. Very bad at articulating those things, but anyway, let's go ahead and do our instancing. So if you haven't done this before, just follow along. I won't explain it too much in this video, but essentially we want to get a sphere. I'm going to actually make this a polygon and then go detail and drag it right down. This will just make it a lot more computationally easy for the computer to run, so this should work on lower end machines. I then want to connect this to a transform, because on default this is a pretty big sphere. So I want to make the scale 0.001 again. So on this uniform scale, 0.001. Very tiny now, can't even see it. Cool, let's connect this into a geometry, like so. That sits under the comp tab. Then we want to get our default rendering components, so our camera and a light. And then we want to grab a render top. Now I have other rendering things going on in this file, so it's going to glitch out for me. But I'm going to quickly just define all of these, but you won't need to do this. Cool, let's connect from this render an RGB key. And then a null, just for, again, to close off our network. And then if we click this little blue button on the null, can't actually see it, but if I turn off the transform, you can see that we have our singular sphere here, and we've made it so small that you can't even see it. But that is all good. We also want to assign a material to our sphere rather than just the default one. So if I go to our material and we grab a constant and drag and drop that on there, it's still so small. What if I drag it up a little bit? You can see. All right, 0.001. Cool. So now we just need to instance this. So on our geometry, our third tab is called instance. Let's click on, then drag our feedback here onto our translate op. And then for XYZ, we want to set R and then G. You can see it coming together now. And then B. Cool. So it's still quite hard to see. If I make this transform maybe like a 9, here we go. So you can sort of see what's happening right now, which is we have our sphere holding its shape, and then we have all of the noise coming in and shooting off in different paths. Essentially, the only difference between this and the final render that we have that I showed you before is that I added a feedback to capture the trails of these paths, so it draws those sort of lines, and that's why we also had such fine, smaller points. At this point, if you want to make your balls bigger and then play with the... Sorry, I'm such a mature person. Play with the noise parameters like this, you're welcome to do so until you get shapes that you like. I'm going to keep everything as is while we do the next few steps, but feel free to do that. So let's make the transform back to 0, 0, 1. Then we are going to create a feedback loop. A few different ways to do that, but in this case, I'm going to insert a feedback here. Then I'm going to insert a level. And then I'm going to do an over. Like so, and then drag this render into the second one of the over. Now if I make that my background, we haven't defined the feedback, so we actually need to drag the over onto the feedback like that, and there you can see we pretty much are done. Now we have a few little more things to do, so don't just click off just yet. But you can basically see that now all of our dots are going off on their little feedback paths and are just forever leaving their imprinted trail. So we actually need to say, hey, after a while, can you start to disappear so my screen doesn't just go completely white? And that's why we have this level here. So on the post tab, we want to go to opacity. And if we set this to say 0.9, you'll see the trails are very, very, very fast. Also on the render, if you have the pro version, you can set this resolution to 1920 by 1080, which I'm going to do. But you might be limited to 720 on the free version. If I make this opacity 0.99, you can see these lines last a little bit longer, and you get a pretty cool sci-fi look with all the trails coming off. Or if you want to go for the full-on line work that I sort of had going on earlier, I had 0.999, and if I reset this, I need to actually also grab this keyboard in earlier and drag that onto the pulse feedback as well. Now if I trigger that, you can see here we get these very clean lines that disappear very slowly, so you don't really see them disappearing, but you do, your screen won't perpetually get too white. It'll sort of hold this sort of still look, which I quite liked, at least for this tutorial. At this point, if you want to set your, so let's set up opacity to 0.95, like so. Now, if we go back, we have our noises here. So you can play with this noise. You can see how this will change. We can bring the exponent up a whole lot. Maybe you want to bring the harmonics and the period up a lot. Maybe we instead want to play with this noise, bring the exponent down, make that a lot more, segmented like that, or latching onto these paths. We've lost sort of the original shape here because, again, we're multiplying this threshold in, and so it's getting pretty lost here. So we want to make sure we have at least some noise going in here, but maybe we can make that the amplitude, bring that right down, maybe bring the offset down. My point is play with it until you sort of get something you like. And then in terms of style, if you're not so much the fan of this very heavy line work option that I just showed like this, another one you might like is if you go to the palette and go to image filters and get bloom. And what would be better, pre-feedback or post-feedback? Maybe post-feedback. So let's drag this bloom in like so and connect it like that. I'm going to, for simplicity's sake, actually no, we'll keep it as is. Let's change the glow color to white, drag the ramp level down. Then let's bring the threshold right down, like there maybe. And then let's make the intensity up a little bit, bring up the glow level. Maybe I want to make the glow level like blue, and then or pink maybe, or red. Get that combination going on. Bring down the glow even more. Yeah, so if you want to go for more of a sci-fi look, you might want to do that. You could even change it to 11-bit float. This will make the bloom sort of behave in a more expected, controlled way, but I don't necessarily like the look of this one. But if you want to go for more of a starry look, then that is a very good option, and then you don't need to do that much of a feedback level, because the bloom will sort of illuminate a lot of the individual particles, so you don't need to have them trail for as long. And you see here, if you do make them trail, it will stack up quite heavily. But I mean, honestly, maybe you like that look, and maybe you want to make it, you know, green and neon, and I don't know, play around with it to your heart's desires. If you've been following with the sphere this entire time and you've kind of bored of the shape of the sphere, then by all means go back to the very start. We could try an object like a super quad, which sort of allows us to morph it a little bit. We could, for example, bring the number of rows down and the number of the columns up, and then play with this. Let's make it 3D like that. Play with these parameters like so. Maybe warp it a little bit. Maybe make it a polygon, and then make it rows and columns if we want to go with that triangle. Let's see what happens when we drag this one in. So like that. So maybe you want to do something really cool like that. Maybe you even want to rotate it. Maybe you want to go into geometry and then go transform and type in ABS time.seconds and then times it by 10. And then let's bring that feedback right down to 0.9, like so. And then maybe you even want to like throw the rotation on all axes and have it spiraling off and going crazy. And then screw it. Like, let's bring the blue. Let's make that bloom even more intense. You know, stuff like that. But that's the whole tutorial. That's the whole 23-minute tutorial. I like to sort of encourage people to, you know, follow these tutorials, but then also give them some ideas where you can spur off and do your own creative interpretations of these techniques that we've sort of learned today. So please play around with this. Please make some cool stuff. If you make anything awesome from this tutorial, let me know, send it through. Honestly, looking at this as is right now, I might even make this an audio reactive tutorial, because this looks like a very cool shape to play with, so that could be pretty fun. Let me know your thoughts in the description below. This project file as is with everything in it completely working is available for download in the description. Just fixing this up. Cool, that's perfect. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.